Good evening and welcome to Albany State University's second evening of poetry and our delight with the poetry. We have two wonderful poets tonight. I won't be introducing them, but they will be reading some spectacular stuff for us. So we're really looking forward to it. I'm going to ask you to please silence your cell phones, if you would do that, so that during the poetry reading, we won't have any bells and whistles going off. So I think the young man who is introducing, is that right, is at the front table, and I know he is at the ready to talk about these poets.
Good evening, and welcome to the 8th Annual Albany State University Poetry Festival. Tonight we are excited to present two literary greats whose contributions to the arts span decades. Their collaborative efforts that called for a cultural revolution through the arts and ideas helped bring about a movement that changed how we view art. In her Nobel lecture in literature, Toni Morrison remarked, "Make up a story, for our sake and yours, forget your name in the street. Tell us what the world has been to you in the dark places and in the light. Don't tell us what to believe, what to fear. Show us belief's wide skirt and the stitch that unravels fear's call." It is in the spirit of this telling that we are here tonight to join one another in celebration of the voices of Black experience. From the beginnings on the slave ships, to the blues of the people furthest down, to the jazz riffs of the Harlem Renaissance, to the functional relevance of the Black arts movement, to the percussive beats of hip hop and rap, we join together in one communal voice that champions reform through love, a love of self, a love of community, and a love of family. Albany State University is deeply honored to have as a part of our many voices reading, two distinct voices whose arts speak directly to the needs and aspirations of humanity as they spread messages of hope, renewal, empowerment, love, and responsibility. Tonight, we are joined by two phenomenal artists whose work challenge us to consider not only the world around us, but our place in it. Tonight, as we pause and listen, we hear Hope's great song that has taught us a people to value their place within their poetic ancestries. Thank you.
Good evening. In an interview with the Lexington Herald leader, Nikky Finney spoke about her latest book, Head Off and Split, which won the National Book Award in 2011. In that interview, Finney said, "I know the sound of the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of standing with signs. There was a lot of shouting. I wanted to be a poet who did not shout, who said things but said them with the most beautiful attention to language. I've been really working on this for 30 years, exploring how those two paths intersect. The path where the beautifully said things meets the really difficult to say thing, and that's where I think this book finds its light." Indeed, Finney's work finds its place in the beautifully said as she has been writing for as long as she has memory. Her poems are powerful and warm like her southern roots and provide glimpses into the human adventures of birth, death, family, violence, sexuality, and relationship, exploring the soul of human community. They both highlight the constants we share and appeal for more compassion, reaching from the personal into the collective with equal measures of love and rage. About Finney, Caribbean poet Lorna Goodison noted, "Finney calls us to consider and value again the blessings found in community, the strong bonds of family, and the transcendent and inexplicable ways of the spirit. Her poetry carefully weaves the personal and the political into a tapestry that reflects her graceful, heartful synthesis of the two." In addition to Head Off and Split, Finney's books of poetry include On Wings Made of Gauze, 1985, Rice, 1995, Heartwood, 1997, and The World is Round, 2003. She edited the collection The Ringing Ear, Black Poets Lean South, 2007, an anthology of poets associated with Cave Canem, where Finney is on faculty. She is a founding member of the Appalachian Poets, a group of Appalachian poets. She has received numerous awards for her work, including a PEN America Open Book Award and the Benjamin Franklin Award for Poetry, an honorary doctorate of humanities from Claflin University, and the appointment as the Provost Distinguished Service Professor of English at the University of Kentucky. She is currently the John H. Bennett Jr. Chair of Southern Literature and Creative Writing in the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina. Each year, ASU welcomes exceptional poets to our campus whose words and grace touch and change lives. This year is no exception. Please join me in welcoming to our 8th annual Albany State Poetry Festival, Nikky Finney.
Thank you so much. How you all doing? It's good to be here. Really, really good to be here. We had a great conversation this afternoon, and we're going to keep it going. I want to thank Dr. Jeff in the back for inviting me, and I want to thank Albany State. I really have been thinking about this on the way here, how very few historically black schools continue the tradition of the arts today for lots of reasons. And I want to just thank Albany State for continuing that tradition and pushing it forward because we need it. It's very, very important. And so I'm really honored to be in the tradition of the 8 years and the poets who have come before me. I stand honorably with them. And I gotta embarrass Frank for a minute because, where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Frank and I met, in 1989. I was a new visiting writer at the University of Kentucky, and Frank was there matriculating, as we say, and we kind of ran into each other on the corner. I was jogging, and he was jogging, I think, and we've been friends ever since. And Frank is a force in the arts, and he was a force in the arts in Kentucky and now has become a force in the arts nationally. And so we go back. And so I was thinking on the plane coming out here, I was like, how round is the world that 30 years ago, I was a new emerging poet, one book out, and Frank was doing poetry and visual arts and theater, and we collaborated on so many things, and the Appalachian Poets was just one of them. And so here we are today being invited as poets for this amazing conference. So do your work, keep your row steady, and sometimes you end up where you dream and hope you will be. I'm going to read from two books, from The World is Round and from Head Off and Split. And I'm going to read two new poems that I'm still working on, but I think they should be ready to be read. I want to start with a poem called Coda. And when I was a little girl, we used to go to my grandfather and grandmother's house up in Newberry, South Carolina, and they lived on about 75 acres of land. And I think it's one of the places where I became a poet, because I could just wander through those trees and think to myself and imagine things, imagine worlds. But there was one other bed in that house. My grandparents slept in a bed, and they had one other bed, and it was a tiny bed. And whoever came, that's the only bed you could sleep in. And in the winter, you did not want to sleep on the floor because there was no central heat. There was a fireplace and a wood-burning stove, and that's it. So after a certain hour of the night, there was no more heat. And so in that bed, there's a picture that my mom has on the dresser of the four of us at the time. My youngest brother came later, my mother, my father, my oldest brother, and myself. And I would climb over everybody to get to the wall because I refused to sleep anywhere else. And then I would stare at the wall and think of my day on the farm as if it were a film. And so I call this my first film. We are four to a bed, so close our hips must come with hinges. A ticking of brown family thrown across the cotton and feather mattress of winter, tucked deep inside the house my grandfather raised up from the red earth straight into the woolly air. The black and white photograph isn't supposed to predict the future, but my mother looks like my unborn brother. And even at 3, I am different. My tiny black girl eyes are a queer shade of green. At 5, my older brother stands there on the end, already buttoned into my father's sense of place. We are so close in this cherry bed. Our lightly touching hips must surely be hinged. Even the children have them. Daddy has moved into place next to Mama. Mama has moved in next to me. I am the only one awake, the only one with a wall. The whole house has fallen. The movie begins. Uncle Billy is home from Vietnam. He is the baby. In the ruddy speckled flicker, he stands before us with a camera that the war bought for him. I call Uncle Billy the Bonneville man. Just like Pop Leo, he can fix anything. Unlike him, he will only drive a car if it's long and pretty. 30 years later, the Bonneville man will die with AIDS, alone in another bed without hinges. A dozen headlights polka dot the night screen wall. Every long, pretty car he ever owned drives by to pay their last respects. He snaps the picture of us all. Horns blow out in a scatter like blue Cadillac whales. We are a charm bracelet of a family bedding down for the night. We are in the outback of my mother's country. We have been laid flat for the sake of photography. The elder Aborigines bump room to rafter, watching us amazed. They whisper how much we resemble early black and white TV. By midnight, more of us have joined more of us. We lop around the old 4-poster in a 3-dimensional ring like a black family cutout doll. We are joined at the hip inside the old home house. We have been hinged together in a place pulled from the red ribs of ancient Indian land, Newberry. We are Southern North American Africans. When we sleep together, the rubbing of our bones makes for a better crop. Daddy's hip bone click-clacks into place next to Mama, and a new brother, 7 years, 10 pounds, and 8 ounces away from birth, snuggles in next to me. The new tenant brother takes up space I thought was all mine, but Mama says not to move him. She says he's the last one. She says he will always need more of her. The Silver Queen has already been harvested. The second reel begins. Somebody down the road passes a new baby over a new grave freshly packed with seashells. The simmering dust is spinning off the blue corn silk. The ochre wind patty cakes the glass until dawn. I know better than to sing along. Mama would only turn and shush me, tell me to stop playing with myself. This is why I always sleep by the wall, for company, so the movie will always have a screen, so the screen will always have a witness. Now all I have to do is live. Big brother there on the end turns. I follow, tumbling in an arc of bones. Our hinges shift but never release. My feet and body begin to rise. I leave the floor without warning. There is a white dog out in the woods howling. Pop Leo will shoot the white dog between the eyes tomorrow, then drag him back to the clearing near the arrowhead ground. He will never explain to me what madness is and how we all can go. I am the only one awake to see the end. For 20 years, something or someone will come and lift me to the ceiling and back whenever it wishes. I will come to know this as brown girl levitation. The black snakes are tunneling under the hay in the barn for warmth. I see the mice go still in terror at the long dragon vessels nearing. They are born knowing they can be swallowed whole. Like them, I have wondered how long it takes to die when you are eaten and made to watch. I started writing poems at a very early age, never thinking that I could one day stand before an audience and read what I have been working on. And we were talking a little bit about that with the students today, about how important it is to sort of keep doing what you're doing if you love it, and sometimes good things happen. I was in a car moving down the highway, and I saw these young brothers on what looked like, to me, a chain gang, a modern day chain gang. That's my father used to call them. And they were on the side of the road. I know you've seen them. they get out of the truck and they do something on the highway, and there's somebody standing there with a gun, a rifle, to make sure they don't run away. And so this is called a new cotton. And I was thinking about how beautiful they looked and how sad it made me feel to see them there. And I was also thinking about Paul Robeson. They are just boys, chain gang to the side of the road, dressed to the nines in sunny orange, that shade of red that never seems to set, familiar color of some foreign flower, the kind you can close your eyes and sleep and still see. But these boys are not flowers anymore. Nothing that can be seen to bloom has been left to bloom. In this place where a chain around a black man's ankle is the state jewel. But if you still own your eyes, you know they are still just boys. They do not yet know how to bend. Someone has not yet passed on the secret of how to save their backs for the rest of the journey. Someone forgot to offer the old way of how to get through the whip of their young days in order to reach the sweet rock of their old. They angle and arc carelessly, not knowing they are matchsticks of American history, never squatting down low in the grass, never bending at the ankle or thigh. They are such proud, brittle lion trees about to break in every direction but free. The weave of all their fabric wasted in the constant picking up of useless plastic side of the road things that as I get closer, that as I pass, looks white and sticky plump. Some kind of new cotton they are picking up, stuck inside their reaching Robeson hands. So I was in Philadelphia, and sometimes you don't have to write a poem, you just have to catch it. And the room was like this, and the poetry reading happened, and then this sister came in at the back, and it was cold and snowing, and no, she didn't take off her coat, and I saw her, and I just kept reading, and at the end, she came up to me, and she said, "Hey," she didn't want to buy a book. She said, "You look like a black woman who's never been hit before." And then she said, "You even write like a black woman who's never been hit before." And this is called A Girlfriend's Train. It's about that moment. I read poetry in Philly for the first time ever. She started walking up all the way from in back of the room. From against the wall she came, big coat, boots, eyes soft as candles in two storms blowing. Something she could not see from way back there but could clearly hear in my voice. Something she needed to know before pouring herself back out into the icy city night. She came close to get a good look, to ask me something she found in a strange way missing from my black woman poetry. Sidestepping the crowd, ignoring the book signing line, she stood there waiting for everyone to go, waiting like some kind of representative. And when it was just the two of us, she stepped into the shoes of her words. "Hey," she said, "you write real soft. Spell it out kind. No bullet holes, no open wounds in your words. How you do that? Write like you never been hit before." I could hardly speak, all my breath held ransom by her question. I looked at her and thought maybe there was a train on pause somewhere, maybe just outside the back door where she had stood listening, a train with boxcars that she was escorting somewhere when she heard about the reading and came in. A train with boxcars carrying broken women's bodies, their carved up legs and bullet-riddled stomachs momentarily on pause from moving cross-country. Women's bodies, brown, black, and blue, lying right where coal, cars, and cattle usually do. She needed my answer for herself and for them too. "Hey," she said, we were just wondering how you made it through and we didn't." I shook my head. I had never thought about having never been hit and what it might have made me sound like. "Guess how many times I've been stabbed?" she asked me. She raised her blouse all the way to her breasts, the cuts on her resembling some kind of grotesque wallpaper. "Hey," she said, How many women are there like you? Then I knew for sure. She had been sent in from the Philly cold by the others on the train to listen, to stand up close, to make me out as best she could. She put my hand over top hers and asked, could we stand up straight back to straight back, measure out our differences right there, and then she gathered it all up, wrote down the things she could, remembering the rest to the trainload of us waiting out back for answers. Full to the brim with every age of woman, every neighborhood of woman whose name had already been forgotten, the train blew its whistle. She started to hurry. I moved towards her and we stood back to back, her hand grazing the top of our heads, my hand measuring out our same widths, each of us recognizing the brown woman latitudes, the black woman longitudes in each other. I turned around and held up my shirt and brought my smooth belly into her scarred one, our navels pressing, marking out some kind of new equatorial lines. So I was really sad to hear that Jet Magazine was closing, because I got a lot of poems from Jet Magazine. And I tell my students, I was like, well, you know, it's time has passed, and you know, it's a post-racial society. I said, stop right there. There's nothing post-racial about America. Let's be clear. We are not, just because we got a black president, does not mean everything is, you know, hunky-dory and, you know, we're all here living side by side. Nope. So Jet used to inform me, because I started reading it when my mother and father started getting it. And here's an example of what Jet used to do for me as a poet. So I'm from South Carolina. There was this big thing several years ago about whether the Confederate flag could fly over the State House. And there were two camps. There was the, you know, Civil War, the children of the Civil War, sad people who wanted the Confederate flag to continue to fly. And there were more progressive people who thought it's time for it to come down. So there was a rally on the State House grounds. Now, the regular media, you know, reported the rally and all of that. And then Jet Magazine reported this. Arthur Ravenel, Republican senator from South Carolina, called the NAACP, the National Association for Retarded People, at a Confederate flag support rally. He later said, I made a mistake, and I feel very badly about it because I said retarded people, and I have a retarded son. He also added, that does not mean I'm apologizing to the NAACP. No other news source reported that but Jet. So this is a poem. When you're a poet, you can't just jump on top of the table and rant, because that's not a poem. That's a rant. Ranting is good, get the steam off, but it's not a poem. So I looked at the situation and I was so mad, I thought, okay, you're gonna have to come through a window and not a door, because you're just gonna like rant on Ravenel and that's not gonna be a poem. So I thought about what he said. And I thought, what do I really want to focus on in this poem? Hate. How does a father with a son struggling to be seen whole in the eyes of the world forget the son long enough for a slip of the tongue to be recorded forever for posterity's sake? How does a father not think that a son will ever know what he said that day at the rally when he slipped and he, the father, revealed his true feelings about him, the son, the same feelings he feels about other different people? How does a father slip off one tongue while he is rallying his Confederate troops and slip on another later after the rally, when he is home with his son, gentle inheritor of his name? He does not. The slippery tongue is one and the same. What could make you forget your son? a fight over an old flag, the heat from a simmering 100-year-old war. I tell you, hate stops at nothing, not even the sacred door to a son's private room. So, when you get home tonight or tomorrow, I want you to, your homework assignment, poets always give homework, is to look up the name Lavina Johnson on YouTube and look up a 5-minute film called The Silent Truth. Okay? That's your homework assignment. And then I want you to find somebody and talk about it. But right now, I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote after I saw the film and after I joined the movement for Lavina Johnson. So Lavina Johnson was a 19-year-old young black woman from Florissant, Missouri, right? And she joined the Army. She joined the Army at 19 because she wasn't ready to go and do what she wanted to do with her life. And so this is the story of her joining the Army at 19. It's called Florissant, and Florissant is French for abundant. Florissant for Lavina Johnson, 19. Before or after he used the back end of an M16 and struck her in the face. Before or after he took his fist and knocked her 19-year-old teeth out, breaking her nose. Before that, the Florissant, Missouri honors student who loved to play the violin, who every year made time to walk for the American Heart Association, decided to put college off for a while, decided to serve her country first, enlisted in the Army. She was deployed straight away for Balad, Iraq, where for all of her 6 weeks she was a communications specialist. Lavina called home every day, her mother, Linda, answering. So glad to hear her happy, upbeat daughter say, "Mama, I think I'm coming home early." The 5'1" 101-pound American Heart Association volunteer was found in a burning tent with bite marks on her upper body. The arm and elbow that once held her violin now broken and distended. Her 19-year-old genital area badly bruised, lacerated, the Army reported. Before he struck his match, this time the only time, he was dutiful. He was careful, sincere, lifting her hips with one hand to pour the hot lye into her womb, clearing away all evidence of his having been there. After all of this, the Army reported suicide. Dr. John Johnson, father of Lavina, filed for his freedom of information, then wrote another report. Let's call it the father report. A report a father should never have to write. A report a country should write. The Army report reported the bullet hole was found on the left side of her head and that it was made by Lavina's Army-issued M16. My Lavina was right-handed, the father reported. How do you take a 40-inch M16 when you are right-handed and curl your 5'1" arm magically around in the air and shoot yourself on the left side of your head? The Army man, the father, will tell you more, much more, if you have the stomach for the details. If your love for your country does not impair your higher affection for the facts. The hole in Lavina's head was made by a pistol, an unfound, unlooked for pistol. Dr. John and Linda Johnson made the Army release the photographs from the murder scene. The pictures show the bloody path where Lavina was dragged through the woods to the tent. The pictures show the remains of dry Iraqi flowers and leaves stuck to Lavina's body, as if she had been dragged a long, long way. The Army report reported that the tent belonged to KBR, private military war contractor, child of Halliburton, and that is where and when the path quickly trails off. The tent was burning, Dr. Johnson's broken heart and strong voice tells CBS Morning News. The tent was burning. In the burning tent, Lavina Johnson's 19-year-old body was fully dressed, ready, as if for the day's full inspection, even though there was only one white dress glove there on her right hand, glued into place. There are no warning signs nailed over recruitment doors for 19-year-old honors students who grow up believing they should make time in their lives to walk for others, fighting for a better world made of stronger hearts. There are no warning signs nailed over recruitment doors for 19-year-old honors students who grow up loving the violin. The dotted line you signed, Lavina, should have included the report that your father didn't know about until after he saw the autopsy photos. The report that every mother and father and family of every daughter signing up must now learn by heart. With your hand over your heart, everyone in this room, repeat after me. Every woman entering these gates has a higher chance of being raped than being killed by enemy fire. So I wrote that poem for Lavina Johnson maybe a year ago. And in the audience one night was a woman a reporter for The Economist in London. And she was about to, this was maybe 6 months ago, she was about to go to Congress because they were going to have congressional hearings about women in the military. I don't know if you heard about this. Because the report, the poem talks about, there must be 60 to 100 cases like Lavina Johnson. Many women murdered. Nobody really talks about it. All raped. 2/3 murdered. And so she wanted to enter this poem into something called the Congressional Record in honor of Lavina Johnson. And she asked me, could she do that? And I said, yes, of course. Because 5 years after this happened, nothing has happened. Next to Lavina Johnson's name is still the word suicide. And you wonder, how can that be? I mean, I can't imagine being Dr. Johnson and Linda Johnson, mother and father. So, the power of poetry, I mean, I care very little about a poem being entered into the Congressional Record because you know what the Congressional Record is. You enter the poem and then they put it in a file and you never see it again. What I care about is bringing the news of Lavina Johnson's life to you. People were signing, something online and then it didn't get that many signatures. But word about it is still in the air. People still talk about being outraged that something like this could happen in modern times, and nothing really changed. So I'm just going to read maybe 2 more poems. And so sometimes I write really charged like that poem. And it takes a lot to write it and to read it, where you go, wherever you go. But it's important, I think, to bring that kind of news to people because we wouldn't hear about it if we didn't. But so one day I was trying to escape my escape poetry. I was like, okay, no more poetry for today. I'm tired, it hurts, and I'm just gonna go to the movies and not think about it. So I went and March of the Penguin was playing. Remember that movie about penguins? Couldn't be any poems in that, right? I thought, I'm safe here. I can do this. And lo and behold, there was a poem. So how many of you have seen March of the Penguins? No penguin lovers here? Come on. Okay. You just didn't want to say you saw March of the Penguins. That's what happened. Well, March of the Penguins is a great, epic film. You got to see it because it's about humanity and life and penguins. And it's about the mother penguin hatching the egg. The father penguin is on like ice that's like 50 below zero. The mother penguin has been gone for a long time. The baby penguin is hatched and standing there freezing to death, and everybody in the theater is cold and wondering what is going to happen next. And the mother penguin comes back, and what does she do? She regurgitates all the food she's been eating for like, I don't know how many weeks into the little baby penguin's mouth. And it's like nasty and gross. Except I have a moment of reflection and say, oh my gosh, that happened to me once. You're supposed to laugh right there. Penguin mullet bread. Tell me if this has happened to you after I read this. It's gross, but gross things happen. She pulls white, oily meat of mullet off the long, sharp bones of spine. The bones prick. She never once says, ouch. I watch her long fingers 7 inches away. My eyes are 2 glossy olives glued to the delicate woman's mouth. It is summer. Behind her, the white curtains she has made move like seagrass, tall, freckled. I am camera. She is the movie. She bites, then rolls, placing plump, soft chunks of fish into the side of her mouth. Her eyes grow big from what she tastes. I study her mouth, not her eyes. Watching her eyes is for later, nighttime, when she will read the day's story to me. She chews slowly, never showing me what's there. Her tongue twists and falls. My dinner moves in slow whitefish animation. She coos like a woman who can taste any flavor in the world. A woman who can hula hoop in her own mouth. My hand rises, my fingers reach, fall short, then fall again. I want to say, Mama, pull the flesh from the throat, not the belly. The meat there has more juice than the meat around the fins, but she is the mama. And I have no baby patois for what little I know of watery things. I have only 17 months of new desire and only 2 ways of showing it. She chews down on the flesh of the fish, packs it around good until it is a perfect caramel mush. Catching some of the juice that falls with her longest finger there at the corner of her mouth, she pushes all of the sweet flesh back inside. Once or twice, she pulls out a hat-pin-sized bone hiding in the waves of tender meat. Only then does she wear her eureka smile. Holding it up in the air to show me, my wishful eyes rise. Her long hand is circled in light. This is what she says. This is why you have a mama. This is why you must never talk back to me. This is why you must love, honor, and obey me. My job, and her toes pas de deux, is to feed and tell you the stories and keep you away from sharp things that might slip into your throat and never completely disappear. Her eyes plie into the slinky circles of her mouth. The sweet flesh is finally ground. Salt and snapper, spit and meal are a fine pate. She reaches her long brown fingers deep inside her jaw, our hinged mouths open, mine prematurely. My fists are flying fleshy verbs in the apple air of her kitchen, balled in sweet anticipation. My chubby legs yoga extend into early orgasmic pose. My chin sets into downward facing dog. My begging eyes and dark mauve lips close in slow around her fingers. The pounded succulent fish and spit lands on the center of my tongue. I swell in my first chair ever, fed by the mother who relishes the story of turning her back and leaving me once to swim off 1,000 miles, find food, fight off shimmering shark, then swim 1,000 miles back just to drop her beak into mine. I I'm the lucky girl of the high chair. Come on, you had somebody do that for you. Chew up your fish and then put it in your mouth. Come on, raise your hands. Come on, who did it? See? Jeff's in the back going, yup. It was like a way of life, and I had completely forgotten about it. So, this is what I want to leave to for the poets before Frank comes up. I was asked by Thomas Sayers Ellis, who has been here, I believe, to give me some instruction for black and brown poets in the world. And I was like, oh, cool, okay. So this is called Instruction Final to Brown Poets. So this is what you got to do to be a poet. Be camera, black-eyed aperture. Be diamondback terrapin, the only animal that can outrun a hurricane. Be 250 million years old. Be Isosceles, Cirrus, Rhapsody, Hogan, Dogon, Hubble. Stay hot. Create a pleasure that can stir up the world. Study the moon with a pencil. Drink the ephemerides. Lay with the almanacs. Become the lunations. Look up the word southing before you use it in a sentence. No, southing is not a verb. Imitate them remarkable days. Locate all your ascending nodes. Chew 8 times before you swallow the lyrics and silver lamentations of James Brown, Abby Lincoln, Al Green, Curtis Mayfield, and Aretha. Hey, watch your language. 2 1/4 is not the same as deuce and a quarter. Some Buick folks in here, I see. Let your fat belly be quilts of quietus. Pass on what the great winemakers know. The juice is not made in the vats, but in the vineyard. Keep yourself rooted in the sun, rain, and darkly camphor air. Grow until you die. But before you do, leave your final kiss. Lay mint or orange eucalyptus garland. Double tuck those lips. Careful to the very end. What you deny, dismiss, and cut away. And when you leave the room, always say, I have spoken the very best I know how. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing someone very close to me and my family, Mr. Frank X. Walker. In 2013, Governor Steve Beshear appointed Frank X. Walker to serve as Kentucky Poet Laureate for the 2013-2014 term. During his induction speech, Walker stated that there are these wonderful stories that are part of being a Kentuckian, and those things continue to be a part of me. And I think they drive my artist activism. When I think about what I write about, subject-wise, I'm really married to family, social justice, identity, and place. Not because I was born with that as an interest, but because when I leave the state, people challenge what's here and who's here. Walker's literary background has deep roots in Kentucky, and his work draws heavily on his experience in the state. His work reflects his unique approach to teaching, his commitment to reclaiming lost stories, and his pride in giving voice previously muted and silenced people. It is this tenor of excellence that Walker is most comfortable. He is the author of 6 poetry collections, Turning Loose, The Unghosting of Medgar Evers, which won the 2014 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Poetry. Isaac Murphy, I Dedicate This Ride, When Winter Come, The Ascension of York, my personal favorite, Black Box, Buffalo Dance, The Journey of York, which won the Lillian Smith Book Award in 2004, and Appalachia. He is a 2005 recipient of the Lenan Literary Fellowship in Poetry, the recipient of the 2006 Thomas D. Clark Literary Award for Excellence, and an Actors Theater of Louisville Keeper of the Chronicle Award. As well, he is the past recipient of an Al Smith Individual Artist Fellowship from the Kentucky Arts Council. He is the co-founder of the Appalachian Poets, and he is the recipient of the 2013 Appalachian Literary Heritage Award from the West Virginia Humanities Council. He was awarded an honorary doctorate of humanities in 2001 from the University of Kentucky for his collective community work and artistic achievements. Transylvania University awarded Walker an honorary doctorate of letters degree in 2002. He currently serves as an associate professor in the Department of English and director of the African American and Africana Studies program, both at the University of Kentucky. Albany State and Albany community, please give me a hand and welcome my uncle, my frat brother, Frank X. Walker.
Right, he gets his height from his mother. Who's here? I'm sure all of you know the Washingtons. Good friends of mine for as long as he's been alive. I'm really honored to be not just here, but back again. This is my second opportunity to present and share on this campus. And it's always good to be in a room that looks like this because my classrooms don't look like this. Almost no place in Kentucky looks like this. And anywhere this many people come out for poetry this time of the day, I mean, it is a good place to be. So I'm honored that you're still awake, and I promise I won't take you hostage. I'm going to read a few poems from Turn Me Loose, but I want to take this opportunity to just kind of extend the conversation that's been happening the entire day. We've had the pleasure of working with students almost since the plane landed, and we've had these wonderful conversations about not just their artistry, but them trying to find their place in this world full of, Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown situations. What are you guys supposed to do about that? What have other artists and writers and poets in other eras done about the kind of violence waged against black communities? Do you sit back passively and watch? Do you use your art, your voice, your music as a means to express, your discontent? You have a lot of choices. Some people clearly choose to ignore it and think it has nothing to do with you because you're maybe falsely believing you're isolated and safe on a college campus. But I hope you don't believe any of that. I hope that you do understand how powerful you are as individuals and as a community, and how very badly we need your product, whatever you're gonna contribute to us in the future, including those degrees. Like, what about after that? When you get that degree, how are you gonna put that to work for your community? And we need that. And part of being here today and being away from our respective campuses is being in the same space and saying basically the same thing, is do that work. So I'm gonna read some poems that kind of, I guess, forecast my interest in history. And not just history in general. I'm really interested in the part of history that's been either undertold or misrepresented. There's some things that we've been led to believe that either aren't true or we only got part of the truth. I'm going to read these first two poems, deal with somebody that Rand Paul reached out for when he was introducing Mitch McConnell at before his victory speech the other night. And he started talking about the founding fathers. And there are a lot of people in the United States, when you say founding fathers, they get all excited and swell up with pride. We know who wrote the Declaration of Independence, and you may not know any other work written by Thomas Jefferson, but I'm gonna read this first poem that is taken from Thomas Jefferson's notes on Virginia, specifically excerpt of query number 14. And this is my response to query number 14. And I'm going to use some of Jefferson's own language in my response to his writing. And if you never get a chance to read it, understand that he states blatantly how he feels about black skin, black hair, black people, black people's intellectual potential, our capacity to make music, but the lack of potential or capacity to create anything close to poetry. That's our founding father, This is a poem called Between the Skin and Scarf Skin, response to an excerpt of Query 14 from the Notes on the State of Virginia, 1781, by Thomas Jefferson. Clearly, you were at a very private party, alone with one, when the scientist in you first postulated your theories on race and beauty and la petite mort, while staring at her immovable veil. You surmised that if you could just peek beneath her reticular membrane, examine the other side of that eternal monotony, you might finally glean scientific proof. Perhaps for the interest of science, you first applied French talcum and perfume to her neck and breast with a feather or fine brush to offset that very strong and disagreeable odor. Then you placed your deeply rooted prejudices even deeper inside her. Imagine yourself an orangutan lusting after an equally exotic species while you probed her interior. For the sake of science, you forced yourself to ignore the offensive nature of her color, her figure, and her hair. How you must have struggled to stay both focused and aroused aboard her without the elegant symmetry of form to which you are accustomed. How could you know you were a man and your instrument superior every time you needed scientific proof? I bet you mounted her, rode until it produced convulsions, which will probably never, ever end. And half of what you heard were actually his words taken from that piece. And the second poem is more specific to the still, for some reason, debated relationship with Sally Hemings, who was not the offensive dark skin he referenced, but a mulatto black woman. And this is called Upon Mistaking a Merlot for a Riesling, in the voice of Thomas Jefferson. I have always favored a full-bodied Merlot, but I digress. I volunteer that I was simply following a silk-throated dove's song rising from my room of books when I first encountered a head of flowing locks buried in my bilingual translation of Julius Caesar. I stood back a pace in some confusion, knowing that women in general prefer being read to over actual reading. I played the voyeur as this one drew down, swooned, then gasped when her fingers teased open the firm leather covers and caressed the parchment and linen sheets each held, as if she were tracing her own delicate brow in a mirror. I lingered on the edge of her circle of light, cast by the kerosene globe, hiding just inside the hips of her own shadow, as she meticulously fingered the spines of memory, reason, and imagination. When she discovered me over her shoulder, such was the color that rushed to her cheeks, I took her for a moment for a white woman. So those are just two of a set of poems that are in direct response, are intended to be a direct response to his language, the language he used about us, the language that you don't hear about in your history books. This kind of counter-narrative that raises him up as this perfect hero, this shining knight. Another project I'm working on is something I'm currently calling the Dogon Love Letters. And what I'm hoping to do is to experiment with form and subject and actually try to, maybe it's the Afrofuturism we were talking about earlier, but science fiction and poetry, what do you get if you combine those things and you start a conversation that begins in the middle passage? And for me, because I wanted to actually write a love story or try to chart a love story that tries to come out of this dark place that is the beginning of our enslavement, what I chose to use was the male figure who's Dogon, And the female character, the woman who's the descendant of healers and seers in her tribe. And if you don't know anything about the Dogon are famous for astral projection, leaving their bodies and traveling around the solar system. They were able to chart the entire solar system and had a map of it inside a cave. And of course, the experts declared that it was illegitimate because there was one thing on the map that was incorrect based on their knowledge. And then they found out years later when they got a more powerful telescope, that map was actually correct. So the Dogon are present in these two characters. And I'll read maybe 3 pieces of this. This first one is called Recipe for Seafood. And the form is an actual recipe. Ingredients: real golden triangles, millions of stolen Africans partially clothed and chained, tight packed, a storehouse full of wombs, full of eggs, uninvited man seed soaked in rum and privilege, vats of cold porridge, no meat, no fruit, no saltpeter, decorum or respect, generous portions of West African sea salt, a whole ocean, a cross. Directions: preheat hull to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, lightly grease a 2x5-foot wooden bacon plank with excrement, gather captives in small groups, unshackle hands and feet, make them dance on a rocking deck, beat, drench with cold water, stare, lust, rape, salt, repeat. Teach them to jump rope with a cat o' nine tails, rape, starve, stuff with cold porridge, stomp out resistance one head at a time at gun and knife point, brand, drink, laugh, break, brag, toss what remains into the ocean, slow bake in an oven for 2½ months, or until a toothpick inserted into the center of her bread comes out clean. This is the second one that tries to take all that negative energy that hopefully you're feeling and try to redirect it at least a degree in a different direction. This is called What I Want to Remember. What I want to remember is not the sea salt from the cold baths that turn our bruises to screams, but the salt in the ocean falling down your cheeks, sorrow tributaries to the river between twin breasts, filling the drinking gourd around your navel and the wading pool in the small of your back. What I want to remember is not how they broke us one at a time, but what resistance sounds like when air is sucked through teeth, how it looks in the right eyes. What I want to remember is not how long I couldn't touch you, but how I longed to and how I long to now. And this third one tries to continue this idea of, if you can imagine the effort to keep the enslaved healthy involved a lot of what they call dancing, which is forcing them to move and playing some kind of music. I have this notion that space is where the first, what we now call the slow drag or the slow dance started. It was born in that space. And these are 2 poems that deal with movement. The invention of the slow jam. Before they plucked us out of our own shit and vomit, unhinged us from their ships, then rechained us to each other. We who survived had been rocked by the ocean's juba, danced and slept next to other warm, dark flesh, touched and danced and could not die. Because our bodies are instruments. Everything we touch is a drum. We whispered in clicks and taps to bare shoulders, wide or bony hips, the bottom of hard feet, the back of nappy heads, eyes closed. We tried to reach to touch a body in the right way, to suspend time. We pressed our fingers to the small of a back, buried our faces in somebody's neck to chase away demons, bad dreams, hard truths. Because our bodies are instruments. Everything we touch is a drum. When we fall into a rhythm and move slow and together at the right pace, we can soften iron, biting into our own flesh. We can become the scabs over each other's open wounds. We can forgive and forget. We can heal each other's transgressions, ill tempers, and dis-eases with a touch. Because the first slow song, the first slow dance in America was out of love and was about resistance. And I'm going to read one more that's tied to that, but it jumps about 40 poems forward to something more contemporary. I'm only a little embarrassed to say that I was a participant in a dance contest in Kentucky last year, the local celebrity dance contest, and we won. But the awkward part for me was learning these dance steps, and it had everything to do with math and less to do with everything I'd learned just listening to music. So it was difficult for me, and probably even more difficult for my teachers and my dance partner. This is called sacred dance. I couldn't separate what was happening in that space from the things I was writing about. Somewhere between the corny boogie walks and the promenade kick into an underarm turn, my mind drifts again. Instead of focusing on the transitions, 8 counts, and shining for an imaginary audience in a ballroom, I am seaside. I am chained to all my people, and we are learning a new step. I miss my turn, the music stops, and we start all over again. My feet are performing a mutiny because I am 2/5 maroon and old school hoofer, all the way down to my big toes. The Denmark Vesey in my bloodline turns a square dance into a Lindy hop, a Viennese waltz into a dance hall slow drag. I cannot focus here because what I need to get back to whole is to be entangled with you, not to watch Dole, Jane, and Dick teach the tango, and not here, not with them for whom dancing is choreographed marching and counting and patriarchal rules about who leads and who follows. I miss my turn, the music stops, and we start all over again. I need to move together to the music of my true love's hips, not to mimic exercise on a ship. I need our bodies to organize, not colonize, to amistad, not obey the whip, to resist, to engage each other in a call and response. On the dance floor, the way sand on the beach and sea foam flirt, the way we move into each other's heartbeats, governed by our breaths and nature's universal rhythms, not numbers. I don't want to just follow the music. I want to make love to my woman on the dance floor. I want to start an uprising with my clothes on, and I don't want to feel the beat. But it's all right to clap. It gives me a chance to pause. Doing okay on time. I want to read two poems from a group of poems that are about trying to break a spell, right? And you will hear all this stuff is connected to each other. This first spell is the cure to eradicate racism. March 9 white children to Birmingham, dressed in their Sunday best. Water hose them down 16th Street and across Kelly Ingram Park. Load all that survive on the slow-moving train bound for the north. Board them in the archives of the Schomburg with only Malcolm's letters to Betty for a night light. Line their beds with dog-eared copies of Little Black Sambo. Wave the scent of Lincoln Center jazz and Romer Bearden under their noses until they can see Alvin Ailey dancers at the African burial ground. Pack them sardine tight on the subway during rush hour at 125th and Lenox. Make them ride from Harlem to Brooklyn with their eyes closed. Sit them on wooden pews in an evening worship service at Sylvia's restaurant, surrounded by a masked choir of Sunday dinners and knives and forks. Watch the holy vibrations mixed with lemons in the sweet tea. Change the molecular structure of their heart valves, inner ears, and corneas. Take them to a poetry slam. Sit them close enough to catch fire. Play the Latino, West Indian, gay, lesbian, recovering voices. Touch them someplace new. Remove the invisible hoods from their heads. Set them free. Watch them fly back home. The second one is something I'm really invested in. It's called The Cure to Eliminate the N-Word. Gather all wannabe gangster rappers in groups of 7. Confiscate their designer clothes and shoes. Dress them in Confederate uniforms. Remove every song they've ever heard from their tongues with a knife. Let the first new sound they hear rise up from the belly of a slave ship. Replace the jewelry around their necks and wrists with chains of strong hemp tied in suffocating knots. Fill their jean pockets with rice, cotton, and tobacco. Give them a reason to sag. While Dixie is playing in the background, rub burnt cork on their faces, paint their lips bright red, stand them like lawn jockeys beside Gus from Birth of a Nation, Amos and Andy, and Step and Fetch It. Order them to dance, order them to stop, order them to bend over. Let the next new sound they hear be a chain gang work song, followed by a tribe of hammers striking railroad spikes. Let the vibrations mend their backbones and raise them to their full height again. Invite them to wade in the water. Baptize them in the name of Claude McKay, Margaret Walker, Nina Simone, Curtis Mayfield, Mavis Staples, Gil Scott-Heron, Amiri Baraka, Gordon Parks, Sonia Sanchez, and the Last Poets. Teach them to read. Teach them to write music. Teach them a second language. Dare them to play something other than the radio. Let them feel the difference between gospel and the blues. Help them taste the many moods of Miles. Tattoo Adinkra symbols and Egyptian hieroglyphics and even rolls on the bottom of their feet. Let them lead them to separate water fountains. Pray they drink from the one marked kings and queens. Take a deep breath. Let the last sound they hear be Ashe. All right. I'm going to jump way forward. This is Nikky was talking about where poems come from. I know there's a famous quote that said, if I knew where poems came from, I would go there. But I think in the same breath that there's no such thing as writer's block. If you're really making art, if you're paying attention, that inspiration can come from anywhere. And sometimes it's not always a warm place. I had a chance to be at a middle school in Frankfort, Kentucky. And when they invited me, they said they wanted me to come and talk to about 27th and 8th grade boys. And I get there, and it's a gymnasium, and there's 200 kids. And there's no microphone. And all the adults walk out. What do you do with this? And so I'm trying to have this conversation, and there's about the third row, there are 2 little boys, look like my nephews, who just won't behave. I mean, they're just demanding so much attention. I stop what I'm doing, I walk over to them, and I just lean in and say, let me know when you finish, because I'd like to get to do what I was doing. And, one of the young men got an attitude. I mean, he tried to, he swelled himself up. And I think I was supposed to be afraid when he did that. And when he did it, I leaned even closer. And I just looked him in the eye, and you could see him recognize that he had never been in that space. There were no black men in that school. So, long story short, I wrote this poem called Monarchy for the princes at 2nd Street School. They glare at me with their nostrils flaring, then avert their gaze when I don't wilt. They puff out bony chests, spread their shoulders like lizards in the wild, needing to scare off a would-be predator. But I step closer, let them feel my presence. Let them measure themselves against all the space I claim. In the blink of an eye, I tell them I am a man, black, that I recognize their smelled it on them as soon as I walked into the room. There are no other men, there are no other black men in this space, so they have filled it with faux braggadocio fueled by the smell of their own piss, have laid claim to the space by default. The teachers, all young and white and undertrained, fear them, fear their hair, their clothes, their music, their shoes, their body language, their silence. Fear any and everything that smells like confrontation, simmers like unmedicatable rebellion, and looks like the 6 o'clock news. But I am not trading in fear. I am only afraid that they have been in captivity so long they won't recognize my scent. I pace back and forth and show my teeth. I lean in like alpha males do. I need them to understand that we are from the same pack. And I'm here to show them what they will look like when their manes grow in. For 90 minutes, I become the father they never had. I am the chorus standing behind their mothers, the ones who are also white, the ones who are not, insisting that they listen to me, the women who gave birth to them, their teachers, everyone responsible for their futures lest they have none. I am the disciplinarian promising consequences for their unacceptable behavior, pushed back for their initial disrespect, held to pay for their indifference, remedies, directions, and roadmaps for their short attention spans, for their yet unrealized dreams, but only because I love them. I love their potential, love their wide-eyed promise. I love their well-masked fears. I say all of this without ever opening my mouth, with a gentle but firm hand on every shoulder I can reach, with serious eyes and a don't test me smile. Every time I arrive any place with a room full of cubs, and I am the only lion. All right, there's a project going on out of Lexington, Kentucky that's called the Love Letter to the World. And I was asked to write this poem that was a love letter to the world. And the plan was to have it translated into multiple languages and have people tattoo parts of the poem on their bodies. And the poem has been connected to a set of graphic images that all make one master image that won't be revealed until a year from now. But to date, the poem has been translated into 9 languages, and people are getting tattoos as far away as Australia and various parts of Europe. I'm going to read you the poem. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that if people read the whole website, the poem is a tribute to the black woman. And it was only about the 300th tattoo, because when you get the tattoo that you download online, then you post the healed version to the same website. And it took 300 tattoos to finally see a piece of the tattoo on a black woman, which was interesting. So I'm going to read Love Letter to the World. W-O-R-L. There's no D there. It's on purpose. I love you, world. Love your 7 different faces. Love your healing waters wide and deep. Love the thing you have with the sun and the moon and what it teaches us about companionship, about change, about revolution. Love the mirror at your navel, how it shows off your hemispheres, illustrating important lessons about balance, about reflection, about centering ourselves. Love how much like little worlds we are, how our earthquake is your shiver, your sneeze a tsunami, an avalanche a mudslide. When you have hot flashes, we call it drought. You once covered your whole body with ice to cool a fever. When you weep daily over our continued ignorance, our epic failures and petty squabbles, our every transgression, our waters break and we are born again. Love your outreach, our mutual attraction, your gravitational pull. For every treasure we steal from your womb, you send us hail and thunderstorms. When we invent poisons and no antidotes and build monuments to ourselves, you send tornadoes and hurricanes to remind us of how small we truly are. And yet, every day you continue to humble, inspire, and move us to tears with your natural beauty. Our own efforts to mimic your vistas are what we dare call art and dance and music and poetry and architecture and language and love. It is the only thing we have ever gotten right. We can't pass the course on humanity if we keep failing the lessons on harmony and until we unlearn fear and hate. Thank you, world, for this open book exam before us, for still believing we are worthy of your love. We who love you, Black, already know that everything we do to you, we also do to ourselves. And I'll close with a couple of poems from Turn Me Loose, and hope you have time to pick it up. I was in such a positive space, it's kind of hurtful to share this first poem, but I think it's important to hear, because the first poem, this is about Medgar Evers, if I haven't said that. But the first poem I'm going to share with you is in the voice of Medgar's assassin, Byron de la Beckwith. And de la Beckwith bragged about having committed the assassination. It was part of how he was convicted in the third trial. And one of the things he said about the assassination is that it was no more difficult to do than what our wives endure when they give birth to our children. So he was comparing taking a life with bringing life into the world. This is a poem called Afterbirth, the voice of Byron de la Beckwith. Like them, a man can conceive an idea, an event, a moment so clearly he can name it even before it breathes. We both can carry a thing around inside for only so long, and no matter how small it starts out, it can swell and get so heavy our backs hurt, and we can't find comfort enough to sleep at night. All we can think about is the relief that waits at the end. When it was finally time, it was painless. It was the most natural thing I'd ever done. I just closed my eyes and squeezed, then opened them, and there he was, just laying there, still covered with blood, but already trying to crawl. I must admit, like any proud parent, I was afraid at first, afraid he'd live, afraid he'd die too soon. But it's funny how life and death is a whole lot of pushing and pulling, holding and seeking breath, a whole world turned upside down until somebody screams. The second poem is in the voice of Merle Evers, Medgar's widow, and her voice tries to attempts to provide some balance as you move back and forth in this dialogue all the way through the book. And this is an imagined address to de la Beckwith's wives, Thelma and Willie. the first and second wife. It's called Sorority Meeting. Merely others. My faith urges me to love you. My stomach begs me to not. All I know is that day made us sisters somehow. After long, nervous nights and trials on end, we are bound together in this unholy sorority of misery. I think about you every time I run my hands across the echoes and the hollows of my sheets. They seem loudest just before I wake. I open my eyes every morning, half expecting Megha to be there. Then I think about you, and your eyes always snatch me back. Your eyes won't let me forget. We are sorority sisters now, with a gut-wrenching country ballad for a sweetheart song, tired funeral and courtroom clothes for colors and secrets we will take to our graves. I was forced to sleep night after night after night with a ghost. You chose to sleep with a killer. We all pledged our love, crossed our hearts, and swallowed oaths before being initiated with a bullet. And I'll close with a poem that's actually in the imagined voice of the bullet, and the details are taken straight from the court transcripts that describe the path of the bullet that passed through Megha's body, into a window, through an inner wall, into the kitchen, and bounced around and landed on the counter. And the bullet fragment weighed 1/3 of 180 grams of lead. And that's the title of the poem, 1/3 of 180 grams of lead. And it's the voice of the bullet. Both of them were history, even before one pulled the trigger. Before I rocketed through the smoking barrel, hidden in the honeysuckle. Before I tore through a man's back, shattered his family, a window, and tore through an inner wall. Before I bounced off a refrigerator and a coffee pot. Before I landed at my destined point in history, next to a watermelon. What was cruel was the irony, not the melon, not the man falling in slow motion, but the man squinting through the crosshairs, reducing the justice system to a small circle, praying that he not miss, then sending me to deliver a message, as if the woman screaming in the dark or the children crying at her feet could ever believe a bullet was small enough to hate. Thank you.
Let's give these two phenomenal poets another round of applause. Awesome, Leslie. All right. On a quick note, the bookstore wants me to let you know that they do have copies of their texts outside in the hall. You can get a copy of those, and I'm sure they'll be happy to autograph it for you. And in addition to that, we have another day of phenomenal poetry. We have the incomparable Lita Hooper. I think she's in the back. She'll be performing tomorrow morning at 11 here. Definitely want to catch that. And then in addition to that, we have a group of ASU students who will be presenting some papers based off of their experiences at Furious Flower this past September. This table here will be doing their thing tomorrow at 10. We have, on top of that, we have another group of students from Tuskegee coming to present a panel on Frank Walker. On top of that, there's all kinds of stuff going to happen tomorrow. We have a tribute to the legendary Amiri Baraka at 9 o'clock. There's all kinds of phenomenal stuff happening tomorrow, and so we want to see you all back again, okay? Hopefully this first day, well, day and a half, I guess, if you look at it, has been something that just whetted your appetite, so you can come back for a double portion. Sounds great? All right, I love you. Drive carefully. I'll see you all tomorrow. Be good, be careful, stay out of trouble.